Good evening, everybody. This is your classmate, Kyle McHale. I am coming to you from New Jersey right now. I apologize for the quality of the video. I don't know how exactly it's going to look, but I don't have a ton of options right now since I am preparing to deploy, and this is in fact the only room that I can use for this video. So for this week's country study, I decided that Iraq would be a really good subject. I do wish we could have maybe coordinated a little bit though between all of us so that we didn't end up picking the same country and boring the professor to death. But in any case, I hope that you all find the presentation enlightening and informative. So I want to start off by looking back to something from an article that I mentioned in week 3 forum post, and that is the one from Richard Shediak. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. But in his article, he lists the, prerequisites, you could say, for a successful economy, and he uses the Gulf country economies to illustrate some of his points. He starts off sort of in broad terms of what makes an economy successful, and then sort of gets a little more specific. So first he starts off by saying that there are two basic objectives of any advanced economy or any successful economy, and one is going to be to increase economic prosperity, and the other is to distribute that prosperity among as many of their citizens as humanly possible. Towards the end of his article, though, that's when he starts to sort of paint a bit more of a nuanced picture as to what an ideal economic situation would require, and he begins to take into full account all of the different institutions in any given country, and he says that it is absolutely necessary for all of them to work with each other and to be completely coordinated. And so that's sort of the essence of how my presentation is going to be focused. That is to say that not really any one thing happens in a vacuum in any given society. It's all interwoven and interconnected. And so the point of the presentation is to focus on the political and economic factors, but rarely are those two things ever completely separate. In fact, they are very, very much related. And so that is what I'm going to draw on for the points in my presentation here. So the main issues that I'm going to hit on are going to be terrorism, unemployment, and infrastructure. There will be a few other ones mentioned within here, but those are going to be the three main ones that I'm going to draw on. And I'm going to start with unemployment because although that might not seem like the most prominent of issues that you think about whenever you think of the biggest issues in Iraq, obviously with wars happening over the last 10, 20 years, and then the ISIS problem right now, which we'll talk about a little bit later. You might not think about unemployment as the front runner of all the issues, but it is actually closely tied to both the political and economic sides of the house over there. So the Iraqi government has had just a nasty chokehold on pretty much all private business in the entire country for about the last 50 years or so. The Ba'athist Party took over complete control of the private sector, thinking that it would increase economic efficiency, which it absolutely did not at all. And also drowning all small businesses who were unwilling or unable to pay exorbitant bribes, just drowning them completely in red tape. So really killing any spirit of innovation. You're really pretty much sentencing to death any businesses that weren't already pretty successful. You have to have a lot of startup capital in order to become successful over there at all by any stretch of the imagination. So for a lot of people over there, running your own business is a virtual impossibility. As you might imagine, that has had an unimaginably negative impact on the economy. So the political side being that the government is trying to run business throughout the country, and obviously the economic side is that their economy is in the toilet right now. And when you think about both the psychological and material effects that that's going to have, that will bring me to my next point, because the impact on society could pretty easily be seen as a driving force for terrorism, which is one of the other main factors that I'm going to be discussing today. So as I'm sure all of you are aware, it's not a new phenomenon in the Middle East and North Africa or MENA region, terrorism that is. Just as I mentioned earlier, nothing really happens in a vacuum in society. There's always some sort of cause and effect going on, and that is exactly what's going on here with terrorism as well. When you, as a government, deprive your citizens of being able to have good jobs, own businesses, operate in some, at least relative sense of autonomy, then you are pretty much, you're giving them very, very limited economic options. And there are numerous different studies that have shown the dire economic straits that so many of these countries, including Iraq, are in, can very, very easily be seen as one of the primary driving forces of terrorism. And there is a man, last name Gunter. One of his pieces that I am working on for this this presentation, he wrote about the different factors that lead to an environment in which terrorism can flourish. And one of the things that he mentions is the steps that this government has taken in order to suppress any sort of autonomy that people have over the economy. And so what he suggests as well on that front is that maybe Iraq takes the economic model of a nearby country, since right now they're actively working on reforming their commercial code, but it's estimated that will take about a decade. That was based on an estimate that was done just this year. So that is absolutely time that Iraq does not have, because first of all, ISIS is still alive and well over there. And even if and when they do completely rid themselves of ISIS, one, they are still going to be in a terrible situation, both infrastructure-wise, and that's actually going to be my third point, as I said, the infrastructure. But they are going to still be left with the same factors that led to their uprising in the first place. So if they could perhaps adopt a system like the United Arab Emirates system, which is already done in Arabic and it's already consistent with Sharia law, then maybe they could avoid the uprising of a similar sort of group in the near future. Otherwise, as Gunter and I see it personally, I don't think that there's any possible way that they are going to be able to avoid, maybe not quite as a violent a group, but definitely some sort of uprising. Maybe it would lead in some sort, if it was more organized, possibly even a government coup, something like that. But definitely something will result from this sort of economic strain that the entire population is under right now. Now, the third major concern, as I just briefly mentioned a second ago, is going to be the infrastructure, which, again, lies in both the political and economic realms as well. The government has also realized the extreme need for quick action regarding some extremely high-dollar projects that they are starting to work on. All in total, it's going to cost a projected about $500 billion US. That's billion with a B, by the way. So they have recently begun calling for help from private investors because the situation has gotten that serious over there. So they are taking steps, but I think that they could definitely use a little bit of help, and hopefully they don't mind asking for it. Like I said, if they could maybe follow UAE's model as far as their commercial code, they could adopt that. And looking like they are at least willing to accept help from foreign investors, which might really, by proxy, force them to have a more open market society. George Bush, back in 2003, was trying to force them to have a more open and market economy, which probably would have been a great thing for them. However, he was never successful in that endeavor, as we have seen right now, because they still do not have a free market economy. But that, in a nutshell, is the overview of the most significant political and economic factors in Iraq right now. As I said, there were unemployment. There is significant unemployment over there. About 800,000 men in Iraq every single year reach the age of needing employment, and the government simply cannot keep up with that demand right now. And it's no mystery as to one of the significant reasons why that is, just because they refuse to give over any sort of autonomy to the people. Then we talked about the terrorism that is a huge part of. If you don't allow your people to have good jobs and be able to provide for themselves and their families, of course, taking extreme measures might be something that they turn to just out of necessity. And then the third one was going to be the infrastructure. And so in the wake of everything that's happened with ISIS, which was tied to the unemployment, the infrastructure is significantly lacking now, so much so that the government has actually turned to private investors in order to help them sort of fill the gap that is going on there right now. I don't see them getting $500 billion in the near future, but at least they're on the right track, hopefully not trying to act completely autonomously anymore, and hopefully that will open up the door to some free market enterprise. Well, this has been my presentation on Iraq and the political and economic issues that are going on right now. Hopefully y'all enjoyed it. As I said, hopefully found it a little informational and pretty enlightening. And that is all I have for you. So y'all have a great night, and I will talk to you soon. All right, bye.